Мамочки. Это дроны. Блядь, это дроны, нахуй.
Moscow's skyline wasn't supposed to go dark. Not this close to the Kremlin. Not under the shadow of a leader who promised impenetrable defences and endless control. But on a winter night, thick with frost and rumour, whole neighbourhoods around Russia's capital flickered and failed. Windows turning into black squares, roads swallowed by darkness, and the myth of safety short-circuited in real time. For once, the lights weren't on for the cameras. This is the moment Putin can't hide. A capital region rattled by long-range drones, critical nodes burned or tripped offline, and an anxious power that suddenly looks human. Because this isn't just about a few powerless blocks in the suburbs. It's about a strategic story turning inside out. Moscow tried to export fear. Instead, fear came home, via airframes the size of lawnmowers and wings the length of a surfboard, programmed with coordinates, fueled by improvisation, and flying on the one thing Russia's air defences cannot intercept: time. And in that time, the Ukraine-Russia war took a sharp, symbolic turn. According to regional reports and Russian officials, a mass drone attack triggered emergency alerts around Moscow on December 30th. The Russian Defense Ministry boasted it knocked down more than 100 drones in just 4 hours. Always a curious claim when airports impose restrictions and neighbourhoods start counting candles. Reuters noted the Kremlin said Kyiv targeted Moscow with UAVs, even as it offered few specifics on damage. Ukraine, characteristically, did not rush to claim responsibility. What no one could deny? The alarm over the capital's skies. The consequence on the ground was far more tangible than any press briefing. 3 cities on Moscow's doorstep, Ramenskoye, Zhukovsky and Litkorino, lost power during the evening wave, with over 100,000 customers reportedly affected. Local channels tracked the blackout as emergency crews scrambled and residents posted streetscapes gone void. The Ramenskoye city administration blamed a line accident. The timing told its own story. You can see the proof in the images. Towers loom over a city that has gone silent and dark. A collage pulled from the Ostorozhno Moskva telegram feed. Timelines of the aerial onslaught. A map that looks like a swarm of red arrows converging toward the capital's ring roads. Those arrows explain what the blackout implied: range, persistence, and a plan that put pressure on Moscow's grid and nerves at the same time. The same night, Moscow authorities also announced that air defences shot down an inbound drone flying toward the capital, and arrivals and departures at Vnukovo were restricted. One of those move-fast steps that tend to follow the reality, not the rumour, of incoming threats. Ukrainian defense media aggregated the power loss and the airport advisories. Russian outlets focused on interceptions and no serious damage. The visual record, however, is stubborn. When streetlights die across multiple suburbs, people notice, no matter how many press releases say otherwise. If you're wondering whether this was a one-off, look at the broader pattern. In mid-December, Ukrainian drones reportedly struck a major oil refinery in Yaroslavl, northeast of Moscow, where industry sources said output had to be suspended. Industrial plants aren't just lines on a map, they're pressure points in a wartime economy. And Yaroslavl is a big one, feeding into the fuel web that keeps everything from troop trains to air bases turning. Reuters' energy desk confirmed the hit and the operational pause, evidence that even deep inside Russia, plants once presumed safe are now within reach of Ukraine's long-range playbook. Then came Tuapse. On the last day of the year, Krasnodar authorities said a Ukrainian drone attack sparked a fire at the Tuapse oil refinery, damaged equipment, knocked a port berth offline, and injured 2 people. Windows shattered in nearby apartment blocks. Responders put out the blaze. On paper, it sounds like a limited strike. In practice, every refinery fire echoes across supply lines, insurance rates, and patrol schedules on the Black Sea. The message isn't subtle. What was once rear area is now fair game. Zoom out, and the tempo looks like this. Russia launches waves of missiles and Goran-class drones at Ukrainian cities, hammering power, heating, and morale. Ukraine answers with pinprick-turned-puncture strikes on oil, ports, and energy nodes that power the Russian war machine. Just before Christmas, Russian barrages killed civilians and caused widespread outages across Ukraine. Grim continuity in a winter of targeted infrastructure attacks. The difference now? Kyiv's reach. Those red arrows on that map toward Moscow weren't artistic flourish. They were proof of the capital's new vulnerability. On the battlefield, both armies ground forward and back in familiar rhythms. Assault companies, trench lines, and the constant buzz of FPV drones. The Institute for the Study of War's late December update assessed that Russian forces continued pushing in the north, including across the border area towards Sumy Oblast, but without confirmed advances on December 30th. In Donetsk, analysts and military experts told Reuters that even if Russia eventually forces a fall of Pokrovsk, a fight long in the making, the rest of the line is unlikely to collapse quickly, given Ukraine's layered fortifications and the attritional nature of Russia's assaults. Translation: the front moves, but it doesn't break. Not yet. Meanwhile, NATO is saying the quiet part out loud. This is a production war. As Secretary General Mark Rutte put it earlier this month, Russia has launched tens of thousands of drones and missiles at Ukraine in 2025 alone, and is churning out roughly 2,900 attack drones monthly, plus decoys to swamp air defenses, alongside near-peak output of cruise and ballistic missiles. That's the bad news. The better news for Kyiv is that, despite a shift in Washington's mechanism of support, weapons deliveries have not dropped off. NATO's new logistics hub and funding model has kept the pipelines flowing, coordinating hundreds of thousands of tons of materiel this year, with a new hub in Romania slated to open. In other words, the West has adopted the same lesson. Industrial stamina wins long wars. Now, let's talk about Moscow's blackout as a military signal, not just a viral screenshot. In Russia's own vocabulary of power, the capital is sacred space, walled by concentric rings of air defense systems, insulated by geography and bravado. When 3 suburban grids cough and an airport clamps down, it's more than inconvenience. It's a breach of the myth. Ramenskoye's high-rise spine, standing like a dark spine in the snow, captures it perfectly. A capital region no longer guaranteed the basic promise of wartime normalcy. The same file notes an earlier blackout this autumn, and even a reported Neptune strike package against energy nodes in Bryansk and Oryol, underscoring how Ukraine's doctrine has shifted toward hitting the power behind the power. That doctrine is now touching Moscow's shadow. None of this is cinematic invincibility. Russia adapts, patches, and retaliates. Air defenses do shoot down drones, repair crews are fast, and the Kremlin, never shy about spectacle, is flexing elsewhere, announcing deployments of new nuclear-capable systems to Belarus and floating big buffer zone talk in the northeast for 2026. But these theatrics don't turn lights back on in a blacked-out suburb, and they don't reassure Muscovites checking their phones by flashlight. The contrast is the point. So what exactly is Ukraine doing differently? The simplest answer is volume and versatility. Kyiv has scaled up domestic drone production. Everything from one-way attack drones piloted by live feeds to pre-planned long-range UAVs riding satellite guidance. Some are built cheap, meant to saturate and confuse. Others are custom-built to thread gaps and hit hard targets, like refinery distillation columns and power substation transformers. Ukraine is also mixing in Western long-range missiles when available, and battlefield improvisations when not. The real weapon, though, is targeting. The ability to find a node that matters more than the cost of the airframe sent to hit it. For Russia, the defense problem is ugly math. Protect the front and you thin the rear. Protect the rear and you think the front. Layered S-300/400 belts are formidable against high flyers, but small signature, low-altitude drones sneak through with patience, terrain masking, and sheer numbers. Every radar switched on becomes a target. Every target defended drains munitions. If you hear an accountant weeping softly in the distance, That's probably the Ministry of Finance costing out interceptors against $20,000 airframes. Yes, the drones are getting pricier too, but the exchange rate is still brutal. Here's where it gets strategic. Moscow's darkness matters because it grants Ukraine a new form of leverage at the bargaining table: deterrence by denial. If Kyiv can reliably threaten the capital's energy, industrial, and transport hubs without resorting to banned escalation, it can force Russia to pay a premium for every week of war. That means shifting public mood inside Russia, redirecting air defenses, disrupting rail timetables, and pushing insurance premiums on Black Sea shipping higher than a T-90 turret after a cook-off. Even limited damage at Tuapse or Yaroslavl ripples outward in days, not months. None of this means Ukraine has a free hand. Every drone launched invites retaliation, and Russia's response has been predictable. More barrages against cities, more pressure in Donetsk and along the border, and louder nuclear messaging. Yet NATO's logistics machine has quietly matured. A new NATO-run hub in Romania, more integrated training pipelines, and pooled funding to replace direct US transfers have kept air defenses, artillery ammunition, and EW suites arriving. It's not romantic, but pallets and rails decide campaigns. This year, they kept deciding in Ukraine's favor often enough to matter. On the ground, both armies continue to trade punches along a front that looks like the world's longest minefield. ISW highlights that recent Russian pushes in the north haven't translated into confirmed breakthroughs, while analysts caution that even if key towns in Donetsk wobble, Ukraine's defensive belts blunt the momentum. For viewers used to arrows sweeping across maps, this can feel underwhelming, but the real arrow to watch just flew over forests and frozen lakes into Russia's strategic depth and turned off a chunk of Moscow's night. Let's pause on that map again. Red vectors streak across Bryansk and Tver, a skein of routes converging around the capital. It's drone cartography, a fingertip outline of corridors intelligence officers have found in Russia's radar coverage and reaction times. This is what adaptation looks like after nearly 4 years of war. Someone in a basement office with a laptop and a coffee tracking which valley gets you past a battery, which time of night slows the alert cycle, which target forces a scramble at Vnukovo. It's not the kind of heroism that gets statues. It's the kind that makes statues possible later. There's a second, quieter shift at play. Russians in the capital hearing what Ukrainians have lived with since 2022. Sirens, the distant pop of interceptors, flights delayed for technical reasons, parents texting to ask if the kids heard the booms, and, for a few hours on a frozen night, elevators that didn't run and radiators that cooled. It's not parody. Ukraine has endured far worse and far longer, but it is empathy by force. That changes politics over time in ways no decree can fully control. What happens next? Expect Russia to harden substation perimeters around Moscow, to redeploy short-range systems closer to power nodes, and to hunt Ukrainian production lines and launch sites with greater focus. Expect Ukraine to keep iterating. Longer ranges, heavier warheads, smarter swarms, and better spoofing. Expect NATO to keep feeding air defense and artillery ecosystems, because this dark versus light duel isn't solved by one strike or one blacked out city. Wars of attrition end when one side runs out of stuff, or out of will. Ukraine is trying to erode both, gradually, methodically, and now visibly, inside Russia's own heartland. A word on propaganda, because we all earned it tonight. The Kremlin rushed out footage and claims about thwarted plots, including a supposed drone aimed at a presidential residence, without evidence that convinced neutral observers. Kyiv mocked the theatrics. Reuters could not verify the location or timing of the alleged debris, and Western officials registered skepticism. The point of these narratives is obvious. Flood the zone with stories until the most troubling one, Moscow lost power after a mass drone wave, gets buried. But the blackout is self-authenticating. You don't need a spokesman to tell you when your lights go out. All of this played out as both sides also traded blows on the Black Sea, targeting ports and logistics to squeeze each other's export lifelines. It's a war fought as much in shipping schedules and refinery output as in trenches and tree lines. Attacks on oil facilities, whether at Tuapse or Yaroslavl, aren't just headlines. They are a measure of whose economy gets a fever next week. If you're keeping score at home, here's the uncomfortable tally. Russia still holds the initiative in several sectors. Ukraine still fields creativity as a combat multiplier. NATO is learning to be a procurement alliance as much as a military one. And Moscow's aura of invulnerability has a burn mark you can see from space. Also, somewhere in a Russian utility office, there's a technician who had the worst shift of his life. Proof that wars reach everyone, even those who never leave their desks. You can tell a government's mood by how many lights are on in the ministries at midnight. Unless the power's out, in which case everyone's suddenly a minimalist. Russia says it downed 109 drones in 4 hours. If they keep that pace, they'll run out of victory announcements before they run out of drones. Vnukovo's temporary restrictions are the aviation equivalent of "I meant to text you." Technically true, but it doesn't change the story. Please don't at the control tower. So where are we after the dark? Exactly where modern war keeps dragging us, out of the heroic frame and into the patient grind. Ukraine's strategy is to make the war cost Russia more than victory is worth. At the front, in the ports, and now in the suburbs of the capital. NATO's strategy is to keep Ukraine supplied long enough for that math to work. Russia's strategy is to outlast, outproduce, and outbleed its opponent, while convincing its citizens that the war is far away, even when it isn't. On December 30th, the lights told a different story, and if you listen closely in that backup generator hum, you can hear the question that matters more than any daily map update. When the war's cost starts arriving on your own street, how long do you keep paying it? Moscow just got a small, cold taste. Ukrainians would call it Tuesday. The rest of us should call it what it is. A warning that technology and willpower have erased the safe distance of old wars. The front line is wherever the next drone lands. And on winter nights, sometimes it's the transformer behind your building. This is Moscow under darkness. The myth is dimming. The cameras will brighten it again tomorrow, but somewhere in the capital region, a maintenance crew is tightening a bolt and thinking a forbidden thought. If the lights went out once, they can go out again. And right now, in a workshop far from the Kremlin's rings, a small team is building the thing that will try to prove it.